never too early to learn that the government is a greedy piglet that suckles on a taxpayer's teat until they have sore, chapped nipples.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. We appreciate that. Thank you very much. Some breaking news that I just got handed to me. An appeals court has revived the suit over Hillary Clinton's emails. How about that? The three-judge panel in the District of Columbia Circuit Court of Appeals ruled unanimously that a lower court judge erred when he threw out the cases. And it may force the State Department to go back and dig a little deeper. About to be a new sheriff in town, so that might make a difference as well. How about that? That is some interesting stuff. Speaking of that, some interesting stories that have come out here just recently on HB2, which was that transgender law. It's just one of the big legal stories from 2016. Wendy Patrick is joining us right now, an attorney and, of course, a commentator. She's here on Fox News. Wendy, how are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate that. I was just thinking about that as we're looking at big legal stories. This HB2 thing has kind of, in North Carolina, it's kind of dominated the news cycle for a while, and then it went silent. Then there was the election, and now it's back.
And now it's back.
It's
back with a vengeance. And, it really is just a symptom of a larger problem. We've got these new laws on the books recognizing things like gender identity, gender expression, and then there are laws in different states that come to the opposite conclusion based on the constituency, how the legislature is comprised. And that's a tension that, gosh, we really would like the U.S. Supreme Court to weigh in on, but that can't happen until they're back at full staff, which hopefully Donald Trump will see to it happens sooner rather than later. But yeah, this is a law that is still on the spotlight on and off for the better part of 2016. And, all eyes are on North Carolina, not specifically for that state, because it's going to be an issue that other states will no doubt be tackling as well in the near future.
Yeah, and, it sounds like it's going to drag out because they can't agree on how to rescind it. So I don't even know. It's going to be 2017, so we're still going to be talking about this.
Oh, we probably will. And when we're done talking about North Carolina, we'll no doubt have another state to talk about. But, it's one of those social issues that is of such importance that we really need precedent to be able to guide both individual state legislatures and companies nationwide as to how to proceed in the face of some of these laws. Yeah, which kind of gets us back to the naturally gets us into the issue of the Supreme Court. Justice Antonin Scalia died this year, creating a huge vacuum, in my opinion, in the Supreme Court. And now it's obvious the president's choice for that spot was never going to get it. Everybody's kind of waiting till Donald Trump rolls out his option here. That's right. And you may recall early on in his candidacy, he released that list of 21 potential Supreme Court nominees. And since he's been elected, he's doubled down and stated that he will, in fact, fill the Scalia vacancy with someone from that list. But here's the challenge for soon-to-be President Trump. Much in the same way that Merrick Garland was a somewhat acceptable pick, even for some Republicans, because he was more moderate, Trump will likely have to try to pick somebody moderately conservative as well, or there won't be a chance of getting him or her confirmed. And that is the ultimate goal, is filling the vacancy, not just creating more conflict in Congress as they argue over, who may or may not be qualified based on what at a confirmation hearing, but to get the highest court in the land back at full staff. So once he's finished his cabinet picks, which he almost is done with that, hopefully he'll turn his attention to filling that very important vacancy on the highest court. Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I guess it's possible the Democrats could kind of make that the hill they're going to die on, but didn't the rules change when it came to Supreme Court nominees? Couldn't the Republicans probably get this through with they don't have to have a supermajority vote to get a Supreme Court nominee approved, right? Well, they could get it through, particularly because there's more Republicans than Democrats. But more than that, and we have seen people go outside party lines if they don't like a particular candidate. In fact, there was the discussion that surrounded the nomination of Merrick Garland, even though the nomination went nowhere. The discussion really was symptomatic of the kind of issues that's important to those that will be involved in the confirmation hearings. In other words, it's not always as simple as just voting down party lines. There may be stances on social issues. criminal justice issues, reformation issues that maybe even divide members of the same party. So it's a lot more complicated than just counting the composition of the different people that are going to be voting. And Trump, no doubt, hopefully his advisors as well, are going to have all that in mind when they put forth their very important nomination.
Well, I would think that the big issue that sticks out of my mind from this year is some of the civil unrest we've seen around the country related to police-related shootings. I mean, a lot of that we're very familiar with in St. Louis because it seemed to have been birthed up in Ferguson, which is just a few miles from where I am right now. You used to be a prosecutor, right? District attorney?
I'm actually still a prosecutor.
Oh, you were still a prosecutor.
That's not the hat I'm wearing today, but I can still talk about the issue.
So, well, you know, in my opinion, the fallout from that, from a legal perspective, has been an attempt by this Department of Justice and by activists in the community with a certain agenda to water down the laws or make it harder for police to do their jobs. What's your take on that?
You've heard a lot of that narrative. In fact, you've even had instances where police officers have come forward and said, I was afraid to take out my gun.
Right.
And it gets to an example of, we want experienced and qualified men and women to apply to the police academy without seeing a law enforcement career as a death sentence. I mean, police officers leave their homes in the morning like the rest of us, wanting to come home to their children in their vehicle, not in a casket. And when you do have this culture that, remember the Dallas execution-style targeting of police officers that culminates in some of these unfortunate incidents, you do have a very charged emotional climate where, when police officers stand down, crime could go up. And that's one of the concerns that many citizens have when they rely on the police to keep them safe. Now, of course, there are good cops and bad cops in any community. Certainly, nobody fits into a particular basket. There's always going to be those that go outside the lines. But for the most part, the citizens rely on law enforcement to keep them safe, and oftentimes law enforcement has to do that by using force.
Yeah, and I mean, from a prosecutorial standpoint, I mean, I guess you could look. I guess it could move back toward minimum sentences for certain crimes to try to keep people off the streets. But then that's not always something prosecutors are happy with either, or judges.
No, in our country, we really face a lot of issues when we talk about the issues of criminal justice reform. And, community policing actually along those lines gets a lot of play because it is always a beautiful thing when the community members know, respect, and trust their local law enforcement. That's a win-win.
Sure.
And the more that different individual communities can attain that standard, the safer they'll be, the safer they'll feel, and the less reluctance they'll have, not only in reporting crime, but in knowing that when police officers respond to a particular community, that they actually are going to know each other, which no doubt will help community relations on both sides of this highly emotionally charged issue.
Yeah, I've got. We're talking to Wendy Patrick, who's not only an attorney but a PhD and obviously a prosecutor. And when we're looking at some of these important legal issues, I guess the biggest one in the room that we haven't talked about was the election of Donald Trump and sort of the impact that's going to have on the legal landscape the next 4 years, because he's talked a lot about law and order.
He sure has, and he's really made a statement that he's repeated above and beyond what maybe would have been even necessary, because we all know it. We're a nation of laws. He has used the emphasis on being a nation of laws to talk about everything from national security to health care to border security. And while he's retracted, dialed back, and even downplayed some of the initial fiery rhetoric about Muslim bans and building a wall, one thing he hasn't retreated from is the fact that we're a nation of laws.
Right.
And no doubt, aside from his Supreme Court justice pick, his nomination is hopefully coming soon, he does really have something to say about many of the laws of the land. Now, he's the executive branch, obviously not the judiciary, and he's not a member of the legislature. But regardless of the separation of powers, we have seen, especially in a land of social media, that public opinion and public sentiment really does permeate so many of the other issues that we see, everything from laws to pressure being put on individual politicians to just really living in an arena where it matters to even ordinary citizens what our Supreme Court is doing, what they're looking at. And Trump has played a big role because he's been so vocal on so many fronts. throughout the election cycle.
Wendy Patrick, I appreciate your time. Happy New Year to you, and thanks for giving us some time today.
Happy New Year to you as well. Thank
have
you
a great day. Thank you very much. That was Wendy Patrick. Boy, what a varied background. She's like a purple belt in karate, and she's still a prosecutor, and she comments on Fox. And I mean, wow. Very impressive. All right, excellent. Coming up, Benjamin Netanyahu is reacting now to that John Kerry speech. I'm going to have more on that for you when we come back.